She was being escorted out of her own engagement party. Not gently, not quietly. Two of Marcus's cousins had her by the arms, moving her through the side door of the banquet hall, like she was something that needed to be removed before the real celebration could begin. The music was still playing inside. People were still laughing. And Marcus, the man who had placed a ring on her finger 8 months ago, was standing at the entrance, watching it happen and doing nothing. Nora didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked at him once. Just once. And in that single look was everything. For years, a shared apartment, a future she had already furnished in her mind down to the curtains. All of it, folding in on itself like paper in a fire. "You could have just told me," she said. Her voice was steady in a way that surprised even her. "You didn't have to do it here." Marcus straightened his tie. "My mother planned this party, Nora. What was I supposed to do?" "Exactly," she said. "What were you supposed to do?" They put her in a cab. Somebody had already packed her purse. That was 13 months ago. Now Nora stood in the back workroom of Maison Sol, one of Seoul's most quietly prestigious fashion houses, at 11:47 p.m., with a seam ripper between her teeth and 3 unreturned emails from her landlord sitting in her inbox. The bolero jacket in her hands belonged to a client whose name she was not allowed to say out loud. It needed to be perfect by 7 a.m. She was going to make it perfect. That was the only thing about Nora that Seoul hadn't managed to touch, the stubbornness. Back home in Atlanta, they had called it pride. Her mother had called it the reason she would die alone. But here, in this small room with its humming fluorescent light and the smell of pressed fabric, it was the only currency she had. She had come to Seoul with a portfolio, 2 suitcases, and the specific intention of becoming someone her old life wouldn't recognize. She hadn't planned to still be a seamstress at 31. She hadn't planned a lot of things. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother. She flipped it face down. The next morning arrived the way bad days always do, ordinary at first. Nora delivered the jacket. The client didn't say thank you, but she ran her fingers along the seam with an expression that was almost reverent. And for Nora that was enough. She took the subway back, stopped at the corner stall for an egg roll she ate standing up, and returned to Maison Sol to find the entire senior staff standing in the showroom in a way that meant something had shifted overnight. Her supervisor, Ji-Yun, found her before she could ask. "The investor's coming today," Ji-Yun said, low and careful. "Not a representative. Him." "Who is him?" Ji-Yun looked at her the way people look at someone who has been living under a rock. Kwon Jae-hyun. The name landed in the room differently than other names did. 2 of the junior staff, who were close enough to hear it, exchanged a glance, and suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else. Nora didn't know the name. She was about to say, so when Ji-Yun grabbed her arm, "Do not speak to him unless he speaks to you first. Do not make eye contact longer than necessary. Do not ask questions. And for the love of everything," Ji-Yun looked directly at her, "do not be yourself. If you're already hooked, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think Nora is about to walk into." He arrived at 2 p.m. with no announcement, and 4 men who walked like they had never once in their lives been in a hurry, because the world had always waited for them. Kwon Jae-hyun was not what Nora expected. She didn't know what she had expected. Something louder, maybe. Something that announced itself. Instead, he was tall, composed, dressed in charcoal gray that looked like it had been made specifically for the geometry of his body. He moved through the showroom the way water moves, without effort, without noise, finding the shape of every space he entered. The room changed when he walked in. Not dramatically, just slightly, like a pressure shift before rain. He spoke to the creative director for 11 minutes. Nora counted because she was pretending to organize a rack near the window and needed something to do with her eyes. His voice was low. She couldn't hear the words, but she could hear the cadence, measured, deliberate, the kind of voice that had never once needed to be raised to be obeyed. She was reaching for a hanger when the rack shifted and 3 garment bags slid off the rod and hit the floor with a sound that was, in the context of that particular silence, catastrophic. Every head turned, including his. Nora looked up from the floor. He was looking at her with an expression that was not quite irritation and not quite curiosity, something more precise than either. She held the look for exactly 1 second longer than she should have, then crouched down and began gathering the bags. "I've got it," she said to no one in particular. "Sorry." The room slowly returned to itself. She thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. At 4:15, Ji-Yun appeared at the workroom door with an expression Nora had never seen on her face before, something between excitement and controlled panic. "He's asking for the seamstress who dropped the garment bags." Nora set down her scissors. "Why? I don't know. But he's still here, which he never is, and he's asking for you specifically, which has never happened to anyone." Ji-Yun pressed her lips together. "So please, whatever version of yourself you're planning to bring into that room, reconsider it." Nora stood up, smoothed her apron, and followed Ji-Yun out. He was standing near the window at the far end of the showroom. His men had given him space, a natural perimeter, wide enough that approaching him felt like walking toward something deliberate. He didn't turn when she entered. He spoke to the glass. "You're American." It wasn't a question. "Yes," she said. "How long have you been in Seoul?" 13 months. Now he turned. Up close, he was more difficult to read than he had been across the room. There was nothing careless about his face. Every part of it seemed intentional, like someone had decided exactly what to reveal and what to keep back. "You weren't afraid when you looked at me," he said. Nora considered lying, decided against it. "I didn't know I was supposed to be." Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite amusement, not quite surprise. Something quieter than both. "What's your name?" "Nora." He nodded once, as if confirming something he had already decided. "I'll remember that." He left, and Nora stood in the middle of the showroom, in the city she had come to in order to disappear, with a strange and unsettling feeling that she had just become visible to exactly the wrong person. 3 days passed. Nora told herself she had forgotten about it. She was good at that, filing things away in the part of herself she didn't visit often. Marcus lived there. The engagement party lived there. The doctor's office, and what the doctor had said, and the way Marcus had gone very quiet on the drive home. All of it, filed and sealed. Kwon Jae-hyun could live there too. She had almost convinced herself when Ji-Yun called her into the front office on a Thursday morning and slid a cream envelope across the desk like it was something that required careful handling. Nora's name was on the front, written by hand. The penmanship was precise and unhurried, the handwriting of someone who never rushed anything. "It came this morning," Ji-Yun said. "With those." She gestured toward the corner. An arrangement of white peonies, architectural and deliberate, sat in a vase that probably cost more than Nora's monthly rent. Nora opened the envelope. Inside was a single card. 4 lines. "Dinner. Friday. 8 p.m. My office will send the address." No signature. He didn't need one. Nora read it twice. Then she set it down on the desk, looked at Ji-Yun, and said, "I'm going to need you to not make a face right now." Ji-Yun was already making a face. She almost didn't go. She sat on the edge of her bed Friday evening in her one good dress, black, simple, the kind of dress that worked for anything and committed to nothing, and had a full conversation with herself about the 17 reasons this was a bad idea. She was a seamstress. He ran something she didn't want to understand. She didn't know this city well enough. She knew herself too well. But then she thought about her mother's voice on the phone last Sunday, the particular tone her mother used when she was trying to sound neutral and wasn't. "I'm just saying, Nora, Atlanta isn't going anywhere. There's no shame in coming home." She picked up her purse and walked out the door. The address was a restaurant closed to the public for the evening. Not a private room inside a restaurant. The entire restaurant. Kwon Jae-hyun was already seated when she arrived, jacket on, phone face down on the table, a glass of water untouched in front of him. He stood when she walked in. That surprised her more than anything else so far. "You came," he said. "I considered not," she told him honestly. He gestured to the seat across from him. "I know." They ordered. He ate the way he did everything else, without waste, without performance. The conversation moved slowly at first, the way conversations do when two people are still deciding how much of themselves to risk. He asked about her work. She told him about the bolero jacket, about the client who hadn't said thank you, about the satisfaction of a seam so clean it disappeared into the fabric. He listened in a way that most people didn't, completely, without preparing his response while she was still talking. You love it, he said. The craft, yes. The industry, she paused. The industry is still deciding whether it loves me back. And the rest of it, he said. Soul. Being here. Nora looked at her glass. I needed to be somewhere that didn't already have a story about me. The table went quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortably. I understand that, he said. And the way he said it suggested he understood it more specifically than she might expect from someone whose name rearranged rooms. This story is just getting started. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. You do not want to miss what he says next. The dinner was almost over when he set down his chopsticks, folded his hands on the table, and looked at her with that same precise expression from a showroom, the one that revealed exactly what he chose to reveal and nothing else. I want to propose something to you, he said, and I need you to hear it completely before you respond. Nora set down her glass. That's never a sentence that ends well. It ends practically, he said. I need a wife. The word landed flat on the table between them. I'm going to stop you right. I said hear it completely. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It would be a contract. 2 years. You would have full financial security, a legitimate design platform. I have connections in Paris, Milan, New York that open doors your current position cannot. At the end of 2 years, a settlement. No conditions. No interference in your life after. Nora stared at him. You've known my name for 3 days. I know more than your name. That's somehow worse. I had you looked into, he said, without apology. Not intrusively. Enough to know that you are exactly what this arrangement requires. Someone with no connection to my world, no agenda inside it, and no reason to stay in it past the agreed time. The honesty of it was almost disarming. Almost. And what does your world require a wife for? She asked carefully. Succession. Legitimacy. There are men above me and beside me who will not fully transfer power to someone they consider unsettled. His jaw tightened slightly. The first crack in the composure, small and quickly sealed. A wife closes that question. Nora was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Soul moved past the restaurant windows, indifferent and luminous. No, she said. He nodded once. All right. He didn't push. He didn't negotiate. He simply signaled for the check and walked her to the car that had been waiting and said goodnight like a man who had made a reasonable request and accepted a reasonable answer. Which was, Nora thought on the drive home, exactly the kind of thing that made a person want to reconsider. She reconsidered for 11 days. On the 12th day, she called the number on the second card that had arrived. She hadn't told anyone about the second card. And when the line picked up, she said, I have conditions. A pause. Then his voice, unhurried as ever. Tell me. I keep my job. My own space. My own name professionally. And if at any point I feel unsafe, she stopped, chose the next word carefully. The contract ends. No negociation. Agreed, he said. Without hesitation. Without revision. She had expected him to push back on at least one condition. The fact that he didn't unsettled her more than any pushback would have. One question, she said. Yes. Why me? Actually. Not the version you prepared. The line was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Because everyone in my life wants something from me, he said finally. You looked at me like I was simply a man who had caused an inconvenience. I haven't been looked at like that in a very long time. Nora closed her eyes. She was going to marry a man she had met 11 days ago. A man whose name cleared rooms. A man with a life she hadn't begun to understand and enemies she didn't yet know existed. She was going to do it because something in his voice, in that specific honest moment, sounded like someone who was also just trying to be somewhere that didn't already have a story about him. All right, she said quietly. When do we start? Outside her window, Soul shimmered, indifferent and waiting. She didn't know yet that somewhere across the city, in a room with no windows, 2 men were looking at a photograph of her face, and one of them was already deciding she was a problem that needed to be handled before it began. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a comment telling us, did Nora make the right call?